I'm available 24/7 to help solve issues.
Right.
Call me 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I don't care. The way that I usually describe myself is an engineer, because that's mostly most of what I do is engineering. So I spend most of the week with my engineering and design team working on the current car and future cars and the rockets and spacecraft and that kind of thing. When I was a kid, I didn't really have any grand designs. I mean, the reason I started programming computers is because I like computer games. And I play lots of computer games, and I learned that if I wrote software and sold it, then I could get more money and buy better computers. So it wasn't really, with some grand vision or anything. When I was growing up, I'd read lots of books, and they were very often set in the United States, and it seemed like a lot of new technology was being developed in the United States. So I thought, okay, I really want to work on new technology, so I want to get to Silicon Valley. I tried at first to convince my parents to move to the US, but neither of them would move. They were divorced, and so eventually I was able to get my Canadian citizenship because my mom had been born in Canada. So I moved first to Canada by myself when I was 17, and then a few years later I moved to the US. The reason I came out to Stanford was actually to work on energy storage technologies for electric cars. That summer of '95, I was looking at the internet, and it seemed to me like the internet was going to have a big effect on humanity. So I thought, well, I can either work on electric vehicle technology and do my PhD at Stanford and watch the internet get built, or I could put my studies on hold and try to be part of the internet. And at first I tried to get a job at Netscape because that was the only internet company, and they didn't respond to me. So I was like, okay, if I can't get a job at the only internet company, then I better try starting something. But I talked to my professor and I said, look, I'm going to try starting a company. It's probably not going to succeed. And if it doesn't succeed, can I come back? He said, sure, no problem. And so I put my studies on hold and started the company. Did some internet stuff, one of which was PayPal. I think maybe it's helpful to say one of the things that was important then in the creation of PayPal was kind of how it started, because initially the initial thought was with PayPal was to create an agglomeration of financial services, so to have one place where all your financial services needs would be seamlessly integrated and work smoothly. And then we had like a little feature which was to do email payments, and whenever we'd show the system off to someone, we'd show the hard part, which was the agglomeration of financial services, which was quite difficult to put together. Nobody was interested. Then we'd show people email payments, which was actually quite easy, and everybody was interested. I think it's important to take feedback from your environment. You want to be as closed loop as possible. We focused on email payments and really try to make that work, and that's what really got things to take off. But if we hadn't responded to what people said, then we probably would not have been successful. Going from PayPal, I thought, well, what are some of the other problems that are likely to most affect the future of humanity? It really wasn't from the perspective of what's the rank-ordered best way to make money, which is okay, but it was really what I think is going to most affect the future of humanity. So I think the biggest terrestrial problem we've got is sustainable energy, but the production and consumption of energy in a sustainable manner. If we don't solve that this century, we're in deep trouble. And then the other one being the extension of life beyond Earth to make life multiplanetary. So the latter is the basis for SpaceX, and the former is the basis for Tesla and Solar City. When I started SpaceX, initially I thought that, well, there's no way one could possibly start a rocket company. I wasn't that crazy. But then I thought, well, what is a way to increase NASA's budget? That was actually my initial goal. So I actually went to Russia 3 times to look at buying a refurbished ICBM. I can tell you it was very weird going there in late 2001, 2002, going to the Russian rocket forces and saying, I'd like to buy two of your biggest rockets, but you can keep the nuke. They thought I was crazy, but I did have money, so that was okay. Particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. Briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say. You do simple math. You say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. Work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week. And then all those things improve the odds of success. If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. Then it's just you have to apply a lot of hours to actually working. So the way I generally do it is I'll be working at SpaceX on Monday, and then Monday night fly to the Bay Area, spend Tuesday and Wednesday at the Bay Area, then at Tesla, and then fly back on Wednesday night, spend Thursday and Friday at SpaceX. In the last several months, then I would fly back here on a Saturday and either spend Saturday and Sunday at Tesla or spend Saturday at Tesla and Sunday at SpaceX. So 7 days a week, sleeping in the factory. I worked in the paint shop, general assembly, body shop.
You ever worry about yourself imploding? Like it's just too much?
Absolutely. No one should put this many hours into work. This is not good. And people should not work this hard. They should not do this. It's very painful.
Painful in what sense?
It hurts my brain and my heart. This is not recommended for anyone. I just did it because if I didn't do it, then Tesla, good chance Tesla would die.
I gave basically both SpaceX and Tesla from the beginning a probability of less than 10% of likely to succeed. In the beginning, I wouldn't even let my friends invest because I didn't want to lose their money. I thought it was like, I'd rather lose my own money. We almost did die at SpaceX actually. So I budgeted for 3 flights. Technically, I did have a plan where I had the money from PayPal. I had like about 180 million from PayPal. And I thought, I'll allocate half of that to SpaceX and Tesla and Solar City, and that should be fine. I'll have 90 million. Like, that's lots, But then what happened is things cost more and took longer than I thought. So I had a choice of either put the rest of the money in or the companies are going to die. And it's like, so I ended up putting all the money in and borrowing money for rent from friends.
If you want to try to come up with an innovative breakthrough, that's going to be how it is. Anything which is significantly innovative is going to come with a significant risk of failure. You've got to take big chances in order for the potential for a big positive outcome. If the outcome is exciting enough, then taking a big risk is worthwhile. It's really how I approach it. But then once executing down a path, I actually do my absolute best to reduce risk, or to improve another way of saying it, to improve the probability of success. Because when you try to do something that is very, very risky, that you have to spend a lot of effort trying to reduce that risk as you embark down that path. I mean, I think I'm kind of constitutionally just geared to just keep going. I don't know. don't know. I mean, it certainly there are times when things don't go well, and then that's quite dispiriting for sure. And so then it's difficult to proceed with the same level of enthusiasm. But I do think the things that we're doing are pretty important to the future. And if we don't succeed, then it's not clear what other things would succeed. And if we don't succeed, then we'll be certainly pointed to as a reason why people shouldn't even try for these things. So I think it's important that we do whatever is necessary to keep going.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. You try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree.
One of the most difficult choices I have ever faced in life was in 2008. I think I had maybe $30 million left, or $30 or $40 million left in 2008. I had two choices. Put it all into one company, and then the other company would definitely die, or split it between the two companies. But if I split it between the two companies, then both might die. And when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, building something, it's like a child. It's like, which one am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split the money between the two. Fortunately, thank goodness, they both came through.
Was there any great failure that you think you have had?
Well, I certainly have lost many battles. So far, I've not lost a war, but I've certainly lost many battles. Oh, yeah, more than I can count, probably. I mean, we had many, at Tesla, we came many times close to bankruptcy. In fact, at the end of 2008, we were only a few days from bankruptcy. It was literally 2 days, or 3 days maybe.
I was curious in general, what do you think of the Silicon Valley mantra of fail fast, fail often, or as Esther Dyson says, always make new mistakes, as if failure is the crucible of learning? I'm curious if you had any further thoughts on that, and that maybe off-the-cuff comment you made out there.
Well, I mean, there are many that sort of, I think there's sort of, there's like some entropic basis for this. Like there are many more ways to fail than to succeed. So you have to explore, particularly like for a rocket, there's like 1,000 ways to think and fail, and like one way it can work. So you could have a lot of rocket failures to explore all the ways in which you can fail. But I do think that one great thing about Silicon Valley is that failure is not a big stigma. So it's like if you try hard and it doesn't work out, that's okay. Like you can learn from that and do another company, and it's not a big deal. I mean, I think it's like quite painful and difficult, honestly, and it feels terrible. The company is sort of looking to me to rally them, and so I do. But I honestly feel super bad. Space is hard, and rockets tend to fail, unfortunately. Even when you've got like a lot of really smart people working super hard to minimize the probability of failure, it's still there, and it's quite significant. And people have asked me like, well, why are rockets especially hard? And part of it is like everything has to work the first time. Like there's no, you can't do a recall, you can't patch it. It's like 9 minutes to orbit or it's over.
That mindset that embraces failure, how do you personally, those kinds of failures would drive a lot of us in this room nuts, but doesn't seem to drive you nuts. Seems like you're very comfortable with it. Can you talk about the mindset that requires for you to be that accepting of that kind of failure?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of time, and within that time, you want the best net outcome. So for all the set of actions that you can do, there's going to be some which will fail, some which will succeed, and
and you want the net useful output of your set of actions to be the highest. So if you use like a baseball analogy, like, you know, baseball, they don't let you just sit there and wait for the perfect pitch until you get a real easy one. They're going to give you 3 shots. And the third one, they say, okay, and they get off and they go back to put somebody else up there. So your 3 strikes on baseball, not on the bat anymore. So what you're really looking for is like, what's the batting average? You know, how you doing on score, and just there's going to be some amount of failure, but you want your net output, net useful output to be maximized. Failure is essentially irrelevant unless it is catastrophic. For SpaceX, the first 3 launches failed, and we're just barely able to scrape together enough parts and money to do the 4th launch. If that 4th launch had failed, we would have been dead. So multiple failures along the way. I tried very hard to get the right expertise in for SpaceX. I tried hard to find a great chief engineer for the rocket, but the good chief engineers wouldn't join, and the bad ones, well, there was no point in hiring them. So I ended up being chief engineer of the rocket. So if I could have found somebody better, then we would have maybe had less than 3 failures.
How do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
There are people who've been in the rocketry business for decades who say about you that you don't know what you don't know.
Well, I suppose that's true of anyone. How can anyone know what they don't know?
But when critics say you can't do this, your answer to them is,
we've done it.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight and the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that, because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
Did you expect them to cheer you on?
So they're hoping they would.
What are you trying to prove to them?
What I'm trying to do is to make a significant difference in spaceflight and help make spaceflight accessible to almost anyone. So many people try to talk me out of starting a rocket company. It was crazy.
What did they tell you?
One good friend of mine collected a whole series of videos of rockets blowing up and made me watch those. He just didn't want me to lose all my money. We're doing these things that seem unlikely to succeed, and we've been fortunate, and at least thus far they have succeeded. Generally, starting a business, I'd say number one is have a high pain threshold. That's it. There's a friend of mine who's got a good saying, which is that starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. Okay, that's generally what happens, because when you first start a company, there's lots of optimism and things are great, and then so happiness at first is high. Then you encounter all sorts of issues, and happiness will steadily decline, and then you'll go through a whole world of hurt. And then eventually, if you succeed, and in most cases you will not succeed, and Tesla almost didn't succeed, came very close to failure. Then if you succeed, then after a long time, you will finally get back to happiness. Frankly, starting a company, I would advise people to have a high pain tolerance. It is definitely true that
I mean, maybe there are occasionally companies that get created where there's not an extended period of extreme pain, but I'm not aware of very many of such instances. But I do think that new great entrepreneurs are born every day, and we'll continue to see amazing companies get built. But I would definitely advise people who are starting a company to expect a long period of quite high difficulty.
It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you're like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problems in the company. The most pernicious and painful problem. I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it and have a fairly high pain threshold.
I mean, as long as people stay super focused on creating the absolute best product or service that really delights their end customer, like if they stay focused on that, then basically if you get it such that your customers want you to succeed, then you probably will. If your customers love you, your odds of success are dramatically higher.
For somebody who's just starting out as an entrepreneur, I think the internet is a great place to start. Because if you're just starting out, unless you've got a ton of capital that somebody gave you or you inherited or something, you have to start a company that requires a small amount of capital, where it's heavily weighted towards the intellectual capital in your head. So I think anything to do with sort of software and with the internet is a really good starting point. It would have been impossible for me to have done electric cars or rockets, right from the start, because those require money to get anything done.
Being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment, because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And that is a really difficult thing to tell you. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. Successful entrepreneurs probably come in all sizes, shapes, and flavors. An obsessive nature with respect to the quality of the product is very important. But even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to. And if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they're focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. And I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. Don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach or first principles, which is rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have kids. As you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
I think when I was, 5 or 6 or something, I thought I was insane. It was just strange. Because it was clear that other people did not, their mind wasn't exploding with ideas. It was like, I'm strange. I don't think you'd necessarily want to be me. It's very hard to turn it off. It's like a never-ending explosion. All the time.
When I was a kid, I was wondering kind of what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What's it all about? Came to the conclusion that what really matters is trying to understand the right questions to ask. The more that we can increase the scope and scale of human consciousness, the better we are able to ask these questions. There are certain things that are necessary to ensure that the future is good. Some of those things are, in the long term, having long-term sustainable transport and sustainable energy generation, be a spacefaring civilization, and for humanity to be out there among the stars and be a multi-planetary species. Being a multi-planet species and being out there among the stars is important for the long-term survival of humanity. The part that I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure, and it makes people excited about the future.
How many things can you buy that you really love, that really give you joy? So rare, so rare. I wish there were more things. That's what we're trying to do, just make things that somebody loves. The universe as we know it will dissipate into a fine mist of cold nothingness eventually. I don't want to sound like things are too dark, because I think you kind of have to be optimistic about the future. There's no point in being pessimistic. What are the set of things that can be done to make the future better? I think that a future where we are a spacefaring civilization and out there among the stars, this is very exciting. This makes me look forward to the future. This makes me want that future. There need to be things that make you look forward to waking up in the morning. You wake up in the morning, you look forward to the day, you look forward to the future.
That second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring. You know, life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living.
A future where we are a spacefaring civilization and out there among the stars, I think that's very exciting. That is a thing we want. Whereas if you knew we would not be a spacefaring civilization but forever confined to Earth, this would not be a good future. That would be very sad, I think. If there are two futures, and one future is we're out there among the stars, and the things we read about and see in science fiction movies, the good ones, are true. We have these starships, and we're going to see what other planets are like, and we're a multi-planet species, and the scope and scale of consciousness is expanded
across many civilizations and many planets and many star systems. This is a great future. This is a wonderful thing to me, and that's what we should strive for.